Hi everyone, welcome to the fourth episode of the Silk Roads and Monsoon Winds podcast, a podcast where we look at everything modern Asia. I'm your host Imran. You can follow me on Twitter at MalayBoy97. In this episode, we are looking at the Indo-Pakistan rivalry, especially in light of the recent series of incidents which occurred between both countries in mid to late February. We will also delve into the Kashmir conflict, the main sticking point in the relationship between both countries. Joining me for this episode is Hari Prasad, an independent researcher on Middle Eastern South Asian politics and security, where he focuses on extremism, non-state actors, and counterinsurgencies. Hari earned his Bachelor of Arts from Marquette University, where he double majored in International Affairs and Economics, and earned his Master's degree from George Washington University, where he focused on Middle Eastern South Asian politics and security, and wrote his thesis on the effects that pro-government militias have on Indian counterinsurgency operations. Hari has previously interned and worked at the State Department, Marquette Center for Peacemaking, the Hudson Institute, the United States Institute of Peace, and taught English in the West Bank at some point. I first started off this episode by asking Hari how he got interested in researching terrorism, and he talked about his personal experiences with terrorism, growing up as a child in America in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks.
Because, of course, growing up in the United States, probably the most, formative political event that happened was the September 11th attacks. And, of course, that caused, a huge thing of terrorism. But, also, from where we were, the only, one of the only Indian families in Wisconsin, where we were living in Wisconsin. The atmosphere affected us a lot differently. So I remember, even, in the first week after the attacks, except for, when they drove us to school, we did not go anywhere out. And I remember, how even my mom, the day of 9/11, she went out to, get medicine for my brother. And she described it being, the scariest thing she's ever did just because of the way everybody looked at her and the way they're, almost seemed like they're about to lynch her or mob her or something like that.
Hari proceeds to talk about how he became interested in international affairs, choosing to focus on India, and in particular, terrorism in India.
And initially, when I started getting international affairs, I could tell you, there's one person who got me into international affairs, and it's Fareed Zakaria.
The CNN contributor, right?
Wait, what?
The CNN contributor?
Yeah. So at the time, he wasn't even CNN. He was just on Newsweek. Because he wrote an article in 2007, 2008 called, the Rise of the Rest. And that was, even though, I had been traveling to India for so long, I never thought of India as this rising economy, this powerful this rising power in the world. So for me, that completely opened my eyes because my parents were very stereotypically Indian. They wanted me to become an engineer or doctor, so they did not have me focus on politics at all. But this in national politics at least. So this really opened my eyes to oh wow, this is really interesting. As a result of that, I started reading, and then I got into international affairs in my college. And initially, I thought I was going to be the next Henry Kissinger. I was going to be grand strategist. So I was going to know about every single country in the world. I realized very quickly on that's not realistic. So I started studying Arabic in my undergrad, and then I realized besides Middle East, just South Asia, especially India itself, is such a fascinating country. Just from if you're a student of international affairs, it's hard to deny India is this huge country. It has so many ethnicities, languages, and all that stuff, and how it all works together. Just sometimes just thinking about it just completely blows my mind. How it's been extremely successful in one sense, and because of the interest of that drove me to international affairs, the terrorism, non-state actors, insurgency, counterinsurgency, that's kind of what inspired me. I need to look at India. And the fact is, today, I would say, especially in the United States, India's conflicts, except for maybe Kashmir, is now well examined, despite the fact it has a lot of conflicts, a lot of places we could learn from, and also just a really fascinating country.
Me and Hari proceeded to discuss the latest series of engagements between India and Pakistan, which took place in mid to late February. To recap, on February 14th, a suicide attack was carried out against an Indian military convoy in the Pulwama area of Kashmir, killing at least 40 soldiers. Later, a Pakistan-based militant group called Jaish-e-Mohammed claimed responsibility for the attack. On February 26, India in response launched airstrikes against what they claimed was a terrorist training facility associated with Jaish-e-Mohammed in the town of Balakot. Indian media later claimed they had killed some 300 terrorists. In response, the next day Pakistan launched its own airstrikes on what they called non-military targets in Indian territory. A dogfight ensued between Indian and Pakistani fighter jets, during which one Indian jet was shot down into Pakistani territory. A pilot was captured and later repatriated back to India on March 1st as a sign of goodwill by Pakistan. I first asked Hari who he ultimately thought came out the victor in this latest incident, not necessarily in terms of media optics, but rather in a strategic sense.
There's people who claim like oh, India won it because like like India crossed a completely new threshold. It's so that it had like the possible, it was willing and possibly able to like reach all the way deep into Pakistan, because like Balakot's not like in Pakistani held Kashmir, it's all the way in like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so that's actually pretty deep in Pakistan. And so like that's why like people were saying like, oh, like India won this. In my own opinion, that I don't think that's really true, because like, so diplomatically, yeah, India, I could say like probably won this tactical battle. But and the larger, of course, you said like you mentioned like media, like I think like Pakistan actually came off looking a lot better, but also like I'm not entirely convinced that like things have changed, because essentially Pakistan has showed like we are willing to go as far as India's willing to go, but India still has not found a way to really deter us at the sub-conventional level, which is like what started this whole like this back and forth anyway. And it's like the same problem like when like India had the surgical strikes in 2016, where even when you look back into operations, like it was purely a very tactical thing. Like they didn't hit any like actual training camps. They hit purely launch pads. So like it's not like theirs were like set structures that like had a very, very important militants or terrorists and whatever that, but rather like temporary structures to like help people get across the border. But for like I think too much of like the dialogue, or at least the popular dialogue, was like we did this, we showed Pakistan we were able to do this, but like Pakistan still continued its policy, and I think it might have even escalated. If I remember the numbers correctly, it might have even escalated after that. So ultimately, I think whether we'll see in the next couple of months what actually happens, but I think like right now, like it's too early to say India won. I think right now it's looking more like a stalemate than anything else. Which and in this case, like a stalemate's not what India wants, because it needs to actually deter Pakistan from using this stuff in the future. So a stalemate works in Pakistan's favor, in my opinion.
Now, a lot of scholars have stated that India's response to the Pulwama attack and the airstrikes were pretty unprecedented. And like you said, it was not like the surgical strikes after the Uri attacks in 2016, which took place in disputed Kashmir. This was strikes in Pakistan proper. Like, what do you think compelled India to kind of raise the threshold and kind of raise its risk levels?
Partially because like I was even thinking like before like India launched the airstrikes was like it can't do another surgical strikes because Pakistan knows it's looking for that, and if it does another surgical strikes, people in like whether it's the BJP's base or just a wider base, like they know like, oh, this is not going to do it. And like also like India has been facing like sponsored terrorism for a long time. Like people have been wanting like actual like sincere action, and I think like going okay, like surgical strikes did not do anything to like deter Pakistan, so we need to make an actual decision. It's like I'm trying to remember what the word for this is, but like it's part of like this giant game of like India. I think part of it is like India is trying to figure out what is the limit of how much they can push Pakistan while keeping it relatively under control.
Is this brickmanship?
Yeah, I think they're trying to figure out brickmanship still. Of like saying how far can we go with like in this issue without like risking out conventional war or even nuclear conflict, God forbid. So I think like it was at the point where like they decided like we had to send like a serious message, not only just to like Pakistan, and to Jaish-e-Mohammed, but like our own population too.
I asked Hari if India had a political incentive to launch the strikes in light of the upcoming general elections in April.
I mean, so as far as I'm concerned, like, I think there's a small part of it that played in like maybe the BJP's thinking, but I would not say personally that was like the driving factor, the main driving factor behind it. I think like the driving factor was like they're trying to deter these strikes, and like we know like this government has taken a much more hardline approach in some senses.
Hmm.
to say we're not tolerating this anymore.
Hmm.
So, and I think like the reality is like regardless of what happened, whether it's like another surgical strikes or some other attack, it would have been politicized by all the parties. And like we see that right now, like the BJP is like trying to say we won the Balkan strikes, we're the ones who are doing this, and like they're apparently going to make a movie out of this. But I don't think I don't think that's going to be that. I don't think that was the main pushing factor of that.
The Pakistani government recently announced they were going to crack down on the Jaish-e-Mohammed faction within its borders. I asked Hari if he thought this announcement was sincere, or was this another example of what former Pakistani ambassador to the US Hussein Haqqani refers to as the Musharraf playbook, which is when Pakistan acts like the victim, promises action, but ultimately does very little to stop terrorism.
But I do agree with Hussein Haqqani, Ambassador Haqqani, that yeah, they're playing the Musharraf playbook, because like what they arrested Azhar, but I think he's back out on the streets.
Hmm.
And like I think like a lot of the major courses like that happened to it, the court cases that they recently brought up were all dismissed or something like that, or at least against some of the major figures. And like if they're like really serious about it, like going okay, like we don't know what the camp India targeted. I don't think there's been good evidence like that the camp was destroyed. However, I don't see Pakistan like actually closing down the camp. They say they took control, but I haven't seen anyone actually said like, well, the camp is actually closed down, or the trade camp closed down. And like, and I was like discussing this with someone else before, like whether Imran Khan has a say in this, and I honestly don't know if he has a say, and I actually don't know how he feels about like Jaish-e-Mohammed or Lashkar-e-Taiba or those groups. But like, as far as I see it, there hasn't been like a real for like two reasons. Like I don't think anything in this incident would suggest like Pakistan would need to crack down on these groups at all. And two, I just think like with the situation happening within Pakistan right itself, it would be like really bad. It would actually be the Pakistani military part thinking like even if we did want to crack down, which I don't think they're thinking about, I think they would say like okay, it would be too suicidal for us to actually crack down on these groups.
But what does Pakistan actually hope to accomplish with using these proxy groups? Is it they want to foment unrest in Kashmir to get international attention, or is it to acquire territory? What exactly do they hope to do with these proxy groups?
It's like a mix of motivation. So I also would point out like it's not just like it's not just like international factors motivating them. It's a lot of domestic factors motivating them too. Because like let's go. And then I think Christine Fair's work has been like done a really great job. That even if like somehow Kashmir was no longer on the table, like Lashkar-e-Taiba is too important domestically for Pakistan to ever crack down on it, because like it provides schools, it provides a lot of welfare networks, and a lot of militant groups have like these play important like kind of like I guess you could say political roles that they can like help take out Pakistan's rivals. Like there's even suggestions in like Balochistan, like a lot of Salafi groups have like the implicit backing of the Pakistani state in Saudi Arabia to help kill other Baluchis, so that way it could like help bring Balochistan under control. But in terms of towards Kashmir, I think it's like one like they've been wanting to acquire Kashmir, so like I don't actually think they believe they can acquire Kashmir through like the use of these proxies, but they believe that they can like cause enough foment and unrest to like have Kashmiris now want to be part of India, and two like it helps internationalize the whole problem, because like especially now that both India and Pakistan are like nuclear powers, and Pakistan's like continuous policy of like supporting groups in Kashmir, like it does like cause like the worry of like what happens if this escalates. Like even like with the recent incident, like I remember like a lot of us here in DC were asking like, oh my God, like they conducted airstrikes against each other. What happens next? Like who's going to stop like the brinkmanship? Because like you can, at the end of the day, like one of the things I had a problem with like a lot of Indian assumptions was like they assumed like the game of brinkmanship was a one-person game. That Pakistan would start this thing off with like a state-sponsored attack, so then India would respond, and that's that. But they keep on forgetting that like Pakistan's another actor, so of course they're going to respond too, and that caused like a lot of worries. Like okay, like if Pakistan's going to do this, it's a worry of the international community, because like India does not want the Kashmir issue internationalized. Pakistan does, so I think that's one reason. Two is also like there's like a lot of legit worries. Some overstated, some not overstated. That the Pakistani military is much weaker than the Indian military is. So like they need the help of these non-state actors to like confront India. I
Mm.
think like what was the phrase they used? Like it was like death by. It was it's part of their strategy of death by 1,000 cuts.
So we're kind
To
of just weakening India over time, I suppose.
yeah, weakening India over time, and also like part of like this rationale it comes goes back to the 1971 war, where in 1971, when Pakistan faced a civil war, India intervened and like created Bangladesh or all of that. And like a lot of Pakistan military, there is like this really strong desire for revenge, and part of like the what India did at the time was support the Bengali resistance, the Mukti Bahini.
Mm.
And so there's like some element of the Pakistan military that says like, we need to do the same thing. Like we will like avenge, we'll avenge what happened in 1971 through like acquiring Kashmir.
The region of Kashmir has been the main bone of contention between India and Pakistan since the independence of both countries in 1947. As well, the region is currently suffering from a 30-year-long insurgency, which has seen thousands killed and almost daily incidents of shootings and bombings. Many Indian officials blame Pakistan for the unrest, claiming that their intelligence services have been providing support to the insurgents. I asked Hari if this argument is fair to make, or could the insurgency also be blamed on poor Indian governance and a failure of counterinsurgency strategy?
Oh, I think like in order like Pakistan, I guess the best way to put it, like Pakistan is throwing fuel on the flames, but there's
Mm.
already flames. There were already flames to begin with.
Mm.
Like so, like I like to bring up the example of the 1965 war. So, like in the 1965 war, to acquire Kashmir, Pakistan started sneaking in a lot of irregular troops,
Mm.
like to like go to Kashmir, started like a domestic uprising, and then like Pakistan would use that as an excuse to like intervene and like conquer Kashmir.
Mm.
But what happened instead was like as Pakistan was doing this, local Kashmiris actually told the Indian military like, "Hey, the Pakistanis are coming in." And that's what starts the 1965 war. In contrast, like the uprising that began in like really 1989, 1987, depending on what year you want to use, was like purely domestic and was like a cause of like what India did instead. And I think Pakistan like took advantage of that. Like they've been using this to take advantage of it because like for them like Kashmir is just as much as an ideological issue as anything else.
Mm.
Uh, and so I think like Indians, there's like a lot of like Pakistan deserves part of the blame, but I think like the problem with Indians is they put too much blame on Pakistanis to recognize what's actually happening in their own failures within the Kashmir Valley itself.
I asked Hari what India's counterinsurgency strategy has been in Kashmir, whether it emphasizes military force, population-centric policies, or a combination of both. Hari explains to me India's counterinsurgency doctrine, referred to as the Doctrine on Subconventional Operations, or DSCO. Okay.
But it essentially deals with like how India thinks about like subconventional conflict. It was like released relatively recently, like in 2000. So like, according if you look at that doctrine, and keep in mind this is specifically Indian military, like the Indian army,
Hmm.
because like that's an important part. I'll get to it in a little bit, but like so to them it's like both military force and but also like wham hearts winning the hearts and minds. So very similar to like how the U.S. would say it is.
Hmm.
In reality, though, I would say like the problem is it's been excessive use of like security forces with like little effort to political effort. So like
Hmm.
especially in the early years of the Kashmir insurgency, it was a very 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 hard response. That there was like this real emergency that the Indians perceived
Hmm.
they needed to do. Like they felt like they actually were going to lose Kashmir within overnight. But so the governor of Kashmir at the time, I remember because I wrote in my thesis that like he literally believed that this was not like a Indian, like this wasn't due to Indian failure, but this was purely uh, a Pakistani conspiracy, and
Hmm.
that everybody on the streets were like just Pakistanis or being paid by the Pakistanis, so they're fair game.
Hmm.
And as a result, like they just used a purely like security effort, and it wasn't until like really they launched Operation. I'm going to butcher this. Operation Sadbhavana,
Mm-hmm.
to which was like this is where like they're supposedly winning the hearts and minds of people.
Mm.
And there's like some effort, like they are putting some effort behind this. And it's like this was launched in 1998, but I think in reality, like the way most Kashmiris would see it, like this has been a purely military effort.
Violence in Kashmir peaked in 2016 following the death of a militant commander named Burhan Wani. Hari gives a brief chronology of the changing character of the insurgency, as well as discusses how the increasing militarization of the region only inflames the situation further and upsets the locals.
Do you see as it's portrayed, there's like three stages of the Kashmir insurgency.
Mm.
There's the initial years led by like you could say the JKLF, the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, which was I would say nominally secular, but in reality you could debate that. But like they wanted full independence for Kashmir, like from both India and Pakistan. But both like India started gaining control of the situation, and Pakistan like did not like these guys, so they kind of undermined the JKLF. Plus, so this led to the second phase, which was led by Hizbul Mujahideen, which Burhan Wani was part of. But the important thing, and this like happened in 1991, 1992, and lasted roughly till like late 90s, early 2000s. But the important thing of these first two stages is that the insurgency was primarily done by Kashmiris. Because like after that you have like instead like you have groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, etc. taking over, and these are groups primarily made up of people who are not Kashmiris. They're like Punjabis, Pashtuns, or other foreign fighters. But what you're saying that kind of scary is like with of course like the death of Burhan Wani, but like even like the recent deaths of people who are being recruited, who are being killed, are primarily Indian Kashmiris. And there's like portraying on security forces because like the nature of like the conflict has changed. And like I know like I saw you did this for your last podcast that you had recommended books and readings. There's like this very excellent book that came out recently by David Devdas called The Generation of Rage in Kashmir. I think it's a fantastic book to understand like what's happening in Kashmir like nowadays. And it's like how you have these civilians who are just very like because right now you have like a whole generation of kids who have grown up knowing nothing but like Indian soldiers on the street. Like in the 90s, early 2000s, a lot of Kashmiris could actually point out like, okay, we didn't feel like we were living under our occupation. We knew the age where like there wasn't like checkpoints and this and that. But like a lot of people growing like Burhan Wani or all his compatriots, a lot of people like who are either joined the insurgency or like supporting the insurgency, they are people like definitely younger than us who don't remember growing up in an environment like that. All they know is like conflict, and especially within like 2000, like I'll say like 2000s to like 2015, 2016, like violence was relatively low in Kashmir, but you still had as many Indian security forces on the street, which of course like after a while, like if you're growing up in that, it's going to feel oppressive, not like it's not what the environment you want to be growing up in. So, and like they're becoming a lot of Kashmiris are becoming influenced, like what they see on TV, like stone throwing in Palestine, like the same narratives and stuff like that. And so like there are, because now we know like happening in a lot of like when the security forces are doing a lot of operations that they face the trouble of like people like pelting stones at them.
I'm kind of curious to know, like, has the Kashmir conflict been kind of like what we've seen in like the southern Philippines, for example, where like it started off as kind of like a purely nationalist uprising, and it just increasingly became more religious in character?
Yeah, so I mean there is that. So JKLF, like I mentioned, was nominally secular. Like of course, like they're nominally secular, they were like responsible for like the you can call it ethnic cleansing or whatever, like the Kashmiri Pandits from the valley. And like even like I'm thinking the initial years of the conflict, the initial like 2 or 3 years of the conflict, half the people killed by the JKLF were Kashmiri Pandits. And just keep in mind, like Kashmiri Pandits are only 5% of the population. So there's like So there's a lot of indication, like, these guys are specifically targeted. But that said, like, when you lost to JKLF, what you guys, the next group that came was the Hizbul Mujahideen. The Hizbul Mujahideen was like unapologetically Islamist. It was like, because like they were heavily connected to the Jamaat Islami party in Jammu and Kashmir.
Mm.
Then once like they're gone, you have like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish Muhammad, and Lashkar-e-Taiba as a Salafi Ali Hadith group, while Jaish Muhammad is a Deobandi group. So like there has been like this like increasingly religioization of like the conflict. But that said, like I think like the main fail of like the problem like a lot of Indian politicians and a lot of Indian analysts and commentators is that they tend to like just say like, oh, if it wasn't for like Islamicism or whatever, the Kashmir conflict wouldn't have happened. So it's like a combination of both nationalism and, especially now, more so than in the past, like a form of like Islamic identity.
Since the election of Narendra Modi and the BJP party in 2014, many pundits have pointed to this observed rise in Hindu nationalism in India. I asked Hari whether this has contributed to the increasing feeling of alienation felt on the part of many Kashmiris.
Oh yeah, like so I remember for my thesis I talked to like what was it? Three people total, but only two of them let me like use their words in my thesis. They're like, they're like nowadays they live here in the West, but they grew up in the conflict. And I think by and large their entire thing was like they're Kashmir separatists. And they were like pointing out like, okay, like we always have this complaints about India, like we want to be separatists, we want Kashmir to be independent. But definitely the BJP has brought like a whole new level. The Article 370 that's like in the Indian constitution that gives like some autonomy to Kashmir was one like a lot of Kashmiris have their own like perception of like how Article 370 has been like undermined by the Indian government. But then like the BJP is explicitly like that they want to like Hindu nationalists are explicitly that we want to get rid of Article 370 and like pass some other laws, because like right now like technically speaking it's hard. It's really difficult to own land. I don't know if it's impossible, but like technically by law it should be impossible like to own land if you're not Kashmiri. It's actually not related to Article 370. It's actually from like earlier laws passed from that to like stop rich Punjabis from coming in. But there is like this thing of like, okay, like the BJP, not only are they explicitly like giving us autonomy, but they're also explicitly anti-Muslim. And like there is like this thing of like, okay, this is driving like Hindutva. It is driving like this kind of fear of like, okay, like what's our place in India as a Muslim majority state for ideology that does not want Muslims.
I proceeded to ask Hari whether the rise of Hindu nationalism has affected relations between Kashmir's Muslim majority and its Hindu minority, the latter often referred to as Pandits.
In a sense, yeah, because there's like some really good books about this. Like, so I can recommend Rahul Pandita. He's like a journalist from Kashmir. He's actually a Kashmiri Pandit who wrote a fantastic book called Our Moon Has Blood Clots. It's about the story of him and his family, because since he was growing up in that period, he and his family were part of the people who fled Kashmir because of like during this phase of ethnic cleansing. And he made this point, like, because even though I would not say he's a Hindu nationalist, because he definitely has like it's a very traumatic period and stuff like that, but like he made this really good point, like during the time when like especially right after the ethnic cleansing happened, like the general left in India completely failed to acknowledge what was happening, and like completely ignored Kashmiri Pandits, and instead what has happened is that the Hindutva groups, that BJP, like RSS, BJP, they capitalized on that, and they're going through camps trying to recruit Hindu Pandits. And like you can argue whether like reality these guys actually care about Hindu Pandits more than like a talking point, but like there's like this thing of like there are like a lot of Hindu Pandits who are like right-wing Hindutvas are very supportive of right-wing Hindutvas and view like, okay, we have seen like what Islamic terrorism really is, so therefore we need to support these guys. And I think that has actually contributed more like kind of to like the bigger divide between like Kashmiri Muslims and Kashmiri Pandits and like Hindus in general. Especially what we saw like after Pulwama and Balakot and everything like that was in Jammu, now, I mean, throughout India, like a lot of Kashmiri Muslims were being attacked, but even in Jammu, like Kashmiri Muslims were being attacked by like Kashmiri Hindus. So
Hmm. One way India would legitimize its rule in Kashmir would be through holding regular elections. However, recently, many elections have been continuously postponed. I asked Hari whether we are seeing a receding of the democratic space in Kashmir.
that's the worry. So like like so partially like like they had they made a recent announcement when the Indian elections in general throughout the country are supposed to be held.
Hmm.
And like there's actually this controversy happening right now about like when the Kashmiri elections are going to be held because and so it's interesting. So Omar Abdullah, who by any measure is like a mainstream politician, pro-India, secular. Like I remember watching this interview because he's absolutely furious because like apparently there because like like a lot of BJP like the of course the government in Kashmir collapsed because it was like a coalition of the BJP and the PDP, the People's Democratic Party,
Hmm.
which who in one sense are very opposite sides of the spectrum.
Hmm.
'Cause, like so I mean like I don't think anyone had really expected that coalition to work, but collapse now. There's like governor's rule now. There's president's rule, but like right now like I think from what like a lot of Kashmir politicians were promised that the election would be held very early on.
Hmm.
It seems like right now like that election has been delayed, and
Hmm.
that's actually really really infuriating because like so in the initial years of insurgency, they held an election in 1987, which was heavily rigged, and the next election they held was in 1996, which is way too long of a space of time for a democratic country like India. And now like there is like the general fear like right now in like the fact like the elections in Kashmir keep on getting delayed over and over and over again is that we're going to see another period going to see like another period like the 90s where like the civilians didn't really have power and like this is allowing like other groups to like kind of like you said shrink the democratic space. So I think like that's actually a very real fear right now. But the rationale that they give is like, oh, we don't have enough security forces to secure the area
Hmm.
to help elections. And like so I remember and like this happened like, again like just in the last week. Omar Abdullah would say like we were assured by the Home Minister himself that like no matter what like they would not have separate election for Kashmir. Like India would be done in Kashmir would be done in the same phase as these other
Hmm.
states because like the security situation would be handled. But now they said they had to delay it so they could like make sure like the other phases are done and they
Hmm.
have all the security personnel, which could possibly lead to it.
As Hari explains, many Kashmiris expressed their dissatisfaction with the state of affairs by boycotting elections, often leading to terrible turnouts.
Also, like we don't know what the voter turnout's going to be like.
Hmm.
So, like the last time like Kashmir had like a major state election, not in 2014, but like I'm forgetting the year right now, but like that actually saw like pretty high turnout because there were like a lot of Kashmiri Muslims were afraid of like the BJP coming to power in the state. But there's like the fear like okay, like a lot of Kashmir state elections. I mean, a lot of Kashmir elections have like really horrific turnout because like it represents like a very big dissatisfaction with the process in Kashmir,
Yeah, as I
and
understand, there was a by-election in Srinagar in
yeah,
I think April 2017, and it was like a 6% turnout, right?
yeah, and exactly like it's like really pathetic turnout, and I know like I don't think like anyone's gonna openly say like oh this like the turnout doesn't matter to us. I think like yeah like if you have 6% turnout like or low turnout. That like speaks really really badly, especially for a lot of like the Indian narratives. Is if you say like these elections prove that Kashmir want to be part of India, if no one's voting, like that's pretty embarrassing in Indian states. So hopefully, like they'll still hold the elections, and hopefully people will come out to vote. But we'll see ultimately.
With India's upcoming general elections in April, I asked Hari whether we might see any change in New Delhi's stance towards the Kashmir situation.
Uh, if I'm feeling hopeful, I would hope it would change. But like, I unfortunately right now think like there's a whole new momentum carrying it towards further conflict. And right now, like I don't know honestly like of any like political leader. Cause like so more than anything, like I'll like the argument I've made before is like regardless of what Pakistan does, Kashmiris are like Indian citizens, And
Mm.
ultimately, like the duty of any democratic society is to respond to its citizens. If you're not, and like Pakistan can only intervene because of like this huge dissatisfaction. So the question for me is like, now what can you do to stop Pakistan? Because they're going, that's part of policy, but yes, but you got to figure out how to like placate the Kashmiris themselves. And like more importantly, like you did have a period before where like the homegrown insurgency, as you will, was dead, and it was
Mm.
like primarily foreign fighters. But you never kept, but no policymaker I know of, like there was no real policymaker who actually capitalized on that, saying, "Hey, let's restart politics. Let's show like Kashmir's like there is like a better like that they should be part of India. We need to restart politics. Like we've turned to civilian life." And honestly, I see Kashmir still like spiraling out of control and probably getting worse. Not as bad as like the 90s, but I don't see the situation improving.
I also asked him if we might see any changes in Indo-Pakistan relations post-election.
I mean, not really, because like at the end of the day, like I don't like one thing is like Modi has not faced a lot of criticism overall. Overall, I would say like towards the stance of Pakistan, the fact like because of course like people make fun of like his trips and stuff like that,
Mm.
but overall like I think there's like more broad consensus by like a lot of Indians like yeah we need to have a tougher hand on Pakistan. One thing that the Modi government was like demonstrating is like okay like a lot of Indians are sick of Pakistanis like as far as they're concerned, whether it be Imran Khan or Nawaz Sharif in power, that these guys don't ultimately hold the hands to like make India safer. Like it's the military that holds power, and I don't see the military really changing their policy. And as I see it, and I could with everything I'm saying, I could definitely be wrong on this, but like I don't see if the military is not going to change. I don't see like India fundamentally changing its policy now.
Hari lives and works in DC, where the movers and shakers of American foreign policy currently reside. As a final question, I asked Hari whether he thinks there's any role for the US with regards to the Indo-Pakistan rivalry, as well as with the ongoing Kashmir crisis.
So on the first part of the question of do do they see a role for America? Yes and no. So like if you look at the Indian point of view, they explicitly do not want the United States to be involved in like say negotiations of what happened to Kashmir. Because as far as like India is concerned, that's purely a bilateral issue and there shouldn't be any international intervention. But that said, so like one of the weird things is like uh, both among Indians and Pakistanis, there's assumption that like if like things between India and Pakistan start escalating, like that country like the United States or Russia or but especially the United States, that it'll be the United States that comes in and de-escalates the situation. So there's like a book by Moeed Yusuf, which pretty much who's like a Pakistani analyst at USIP, who pretty much like stay in his thing of like examining like these like nuclear dynamics between India and Pakistan, pretty much said like, oh yeah, it seems like. I mean, I'm really simplifying here, but like going, yeah, like it seems like a third party like United States is what's supposed to be responsible to help make sure like tensions between India and Pakistan don't get out of control and
Mm.
escalate beyond the control.
Mm.
On the second part of your question of well, like what should the United States do towards Kashmir and stuff like that, like so. I kind of agree with like the general thing, like okay, this needs to be solved by India and Pakistan, and right now, like I don't think like one India does not want international intervention, and I don't think it's at the point where Pakistan actually trusts the United States enough. 'Cause I think it views the United States as being too pro-India to
Mm.
actually be like a good neutral power, and we see like especially with Israel Palestine how like U.S. influence has probably hurt the peace process more than anything else.
Mm.
Uh, but I think like what it should do, of course, like keep a vigilant eye, make sure like tensions don't de-escalate out of control. But also like just on the Pakistani side, like a lot of stuff like with the policy of extremism for like the longest time, especially even in the post 9/11 war era, the U.S. essentially helped subsidize Pakistan sponsoring these proxies and stuff like that, and
Mm.
helped empower dictators. Like so, I remember even like uh, I'm not going to say I'm not allowed to say where I got this from, but like how essentially like the Americans would rather deal with the military people rather than the civilians because like oh military people are the ones who be able to do stuff for us, which makes sense. But but yeah, you're legitimizing military leadership and military control over civilian leadership in Pakistan, and that like completely undermines civilian rule, and that undermines like creating like an actual democratic policy. So I think like the United States has to like stop like funding the military in Pakistan, like stop like providing like it's pretty much essentially subsidizing like the proxies and put pressure on like these proxies.
Many thanks to Hari Prasad for appearing on today's episode. You can follow him on Twitter at HariPrasad91. Details in the description below. Have a good one, folks.